Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Milan Forrester and I'm a violinist who shares my life on social media with you all. In today's video, we're going to be talking all about how to handle criticism and rejection and critique as a musician in the music world. I'm going to give you some tips to help you accept feedback in a constructive way and learn how to find a positive light in all the feedback you receive. So we can look at criticism and critique and even rejection. I'm just going to refer to it as criticism and critique because I think rejection happens, but the main two that I feel like me and my friends and my colleagues experience the most is just criticism and input from people, whether it's good or bad, and critique on how our playing is. So I'm just going to refer to it under that sort of realm. But I think it is something that definitely happens a lot. And it's really, really important because if you never receive any feedback on your playing, you never know if you're doing something well or if you're doing something correctly or if you're doing something wrong, etc., etc. And so it's actually really, really important to get feedback. Now, I do want to add the caveat here that you are probably going to receive input and critique and thoughts and criticism from many different people throughout your life, in all realms of your life. People are going to have input on your decisions you make in your personal life, how you live your life, how you, as a musician, choose to make decisions and where you play and what music you choose to play and how you choose to play it. All of that is going to have input from other people. Now, I want to make the distinction that you don't always have to accept that input or apply it to your life. I think there's something to be said for taking in all the information and thoughts that people have about something you're doing or making a decision about or how you're playing a piece, and then deciding what of those thoughts and feelings and ideas, critique, whatever that people have offered to you are applicable or helpful to you. This was something that I got told by one of my first teachers when I was starting out my violin career. I was very, very young. And she told me, you are going to have lots and lots of teachers across your career, tons of them. And they all are going to have their own way of playing the violin and doing things and how they like to do everything. And you should take all the information that they give you and then decide what parts of those thoughts and that way that they play the violin are applicable to you and that you want to do yourself. So what happens is you absorb all the information that all these different people and teachers and professionals are giving you, and then you distill it down to what is Milan interested in? What is Milan going to focus on? What are the things that Milan thinks are important in her violin career? And that was one of the best pieces of advice I have ever received because now that I'm over a decade into my career and I'm just beginning, but I have learned a lot by keeping that in mind as I listen to different professionals and teachers and colleagues, and everybody gives input and thoughts on how I'm doing something or how I'm playing something. And when I just take all that information, accept it, be gracious, and then decide, okay, what are the things that are really helpful to me where I am in playing the piece or working on something? Because a lot of times the criticism or the input that you're receiving from professionals or colleagues or friends or whatever may be really, really helpful, but sometimes you just aren't ready for that information yet. Or you're well past that information, like you've already worked on that thing. Like somebody says, oh, hey, I thought you could have done this with your phrasing or this with your dynamics, or you could have played this a little differently in your bow, or you could have had a different sound or whatever. And maybe you've already worked on that, or maybe that's something you're just not ready for yet. Like you haven't gotten to that point in your preparation and practicing of the piece. So it's very good to keep in mind the fact that just because someone is giving you information or criticism or an idea or thoughts, it doesn't always mean that you have to execute it. And it doesn't always mean that if you aren't ready to execute it, that it's bad information or that's bad input. It just means that maybe you're not ready for it, or maybe that's not where you're at in your learning process. This is where I would suggest that you make goals for yourself. And this is something that, if you know me, I talk about a lot. I love setting goals. I love having targets to aim for, things I'm working on, etc. But this is where I would suggest setting goals for yourself for whatever piece of music or technique that you're working on. And then at the end of a performance or whatever, if people are giving you feedback, then it can be really helpful to line that feedback up and pit it against your goals and be like, okay, where does this match up to my goals? And what of this information is helpful to where I'm trying to go with this piece or with this technique or how I'm playing, whatever. And then kind of decide, okay, this criticism or this critique was really helpful because this is something I'm actually working on. Like this person said, hey, you really need to play out in this section because nobody can hear you. Okay, that lines up with my goal of having a really good sound. So I'm going to take that information and see how I can apply it to my everyday practice so that I can continue to improve my sound. So that's how you can kind of line up the input and feedback that you receive, and then look at it in relation to what are your goals and decide, is this helpful to my goals? It can be a really great way to weed out, especially if you're getting a lot of input and information all at the same time. It can be a really great way to kind of weed out what things might be helpful, but not currently, like not what you're focusing on right now, and then just kind of focus on the things that are really helping you advance and move forward. I would also like to make the very strong point that you should always be accepting to any sort of input. Obviously, you don't have to apply every single piece of input or feedback that you receive to your playing or your life or whatever. But especially as a musician, we often run across people or interact with people after performances or before or in social circumstances, and they are really just 99.999% of the time really just trying to be helpful. And it can be easy as musicians because we are so self-critical a lot of the time because we're constantly trying to fix things and critiquing ourselves during practice to feel like the input we're receiving is constantly negative, when really people are just trying to be helpful and really trying to help you out. And so I would suggest strongly that you be really gracious and kind and accepting to any sort of input that you receive from others, because it will really help you go a long way, and it will make your interactions and how people perceive you much more positive and in a much more positive light. Unfortunately, I have run across people in my career, both students and professionals, who haven't been accepting of critique or criticism or just feedback in general, or any sort of dialogue about their performance or how they played or just them as a musician. And they often don't go nearly as far in their careers, or they really struggle to be able to have experiences and opportunities because people find them hard to work with. And even if they're not necessarily hard to work with as far as they're not able to execute a skill, when they don't accept input from professionals or just colleagues, it makes it really difficult for people to help them and give input. And so it just usually does not serve them well. Okay, I'm editing right now, and I just wanted to insert in here that I totally get that sometimes it's really, really hard to be positive or kind or gracious to somebody, especially if they're just being really rude or pessimistic. And I totally get that. I have run across people throughout my life and my musical career who have been like that. But if you just focus on trying to remember what your goals are and where you're trying to go, and just kind of let those negative thoughts and comments kind of roll off your shoulder a bit, even if it's really hard, it will just help you advance further and have a better outlook on life. And always remember that 99.9999% of the time, like I already said, people are just trying to help you. They want the best for you. And if you just view all the input you receive under that light, it makes it a lot easier to receive input, even if it's more negative or it feels negative in the moment. Just have the thought in the back of your head that people are just trying to help you and they really want you to go far and do well. Because chances are, if you're interacting with a professional in the industry, they have received tons of input and critique, criticism, rejection, all of these things throughout their career, and they know exactly how it feels. They have been where you are currently, and they know how it feels, and they know how hard it is, and they're really just trying to help you out and help advance your career. And a lot of times they don't want you to make the same mistakes they did, and so they're trying to help kind of shortcut your process so you don't have to struggle with the same things they did. I would also like to add the note here that if you are giving somebody else, i.e. another musician, a colleague, or if you're a non-musician giving input or critique to a musician, to just be very kind with how you give the information and try and keep it very concise. A lot of the time when you're receiving critique or feedback, it can often feels like you're standing at the end of a fire hose and there's just all this information coming in. So if you're giving input or critique, first of all, be as kind as possible, be encouraging, offer everything in as positive of a light as possible, because you want that person to feel supported and encouraged and not like you're just putting them down. And also try and be very concise in how you give that information and be as clear as possible. I know it's not the easiest. I struggle with this a lot because I have a lot of thoughts and I love to talk. And so I often give a lot of information all at once. And so if you're just very thoughtful in how you give that feedback, oftentimes it can be really, really helpful to that person. And I've gotten several people who have come up to me in recent years and been like, I really appreciated the fact that you were just very clear with what your thoughts were about my performance or what you thought I could improve. It was just really helpful because it was very concise and easy to understand. So try and make it as easy for that person who's receiving your feedback to absorb it and understand it. And my last thought is to just remember that we are all working towards our goals and we're all working to get better. So just be encouraging and kind to the people you come across, both in your musical journey and outside of it, because it just makes the world a better place and makes it more enjoyable for all of us. Thank you so much for watching today's video. This is the second to last video in my Musician Success series. Next week, next Friday at 7 p.m. will be the premiere of the last video in the series. I have not nailed down the topic for that yet, so if you have any ideas or thoughts about something you want me to talk about in the last video, feel free to drop them in the comments. I will read all of your comments and answer them. And until then, please feel free to like and subscribe, as it really does help me out, and I will see you guys in the next video.